Okay, so today I wanted to start unraveling the model that we're going to be going over the next couple of months. It's going to take a couple of months to get through this. Today we're going to again be talking about the basic concept. This is the map that I use. It is a map that was created to be a replacement for the Mercator projection, a more accurate replacement. What you'll notice is this is basically a one-sided globe. It is all of the continents and everything laid out as they would be on a flat, one-sided Mercator projection. And you'll notice that the tropics and the Antarctic continent, Antarctica is more like a continent. It's like an island. It's not a ring, right? I don't think there is a ring. I think that when you get to the edge of Earth, that you literally come out the other side, because this is all that we can access inside of 3D reality, right? So if we read the Bible and we read the book of Enoch and we read extra biblical texts that are out there all over the world, we can see that there is a different concept to reality, to the world that we live in. And our world is so finite. You know, when we look at three-dimensional space is such a finite thing. You have space causing time in three-dimensional space. You have all these outlandish theories, and time is definitely a part of dimensional space. But it is so limiting in 3 dimensions. And we can't conceptualize that, because it would be like a person living on a sheet of paper as a dot trying to visualize what it would be like in the 3D world, right? But one thing we know about a piece of paper is if I take a piece of paper and I scale it, so I have a piece of paper in front of me, and I say that this piece of paper is 40 light years across, right? And I put 2 dots on this piece of paper, this 2-dimensional slice that's in front of me. I can, like we've all seen in the movies, fold these 2 dots together, right? I can fold the 2-dimensional space in any way that is necessary to make these 2 dots end up in the same place, right? So when we go from 2D to 3D, we see the ability to manipulate the lower dimension, right? Talking about spatial dimensions. So that's what we're going to be talking about. How are we going to make the Earth stitch itself together? That's where I want to start with this, and I want to show you how it fits into kind of what I'm visualizing here, and it does work. When you look at the model that is presented in the scripture, it is very accurate. It doesn't necessarily line up to what our expectations would be as 3D beings and a 3D or 4D, space-time continuum, whatever you want to call it. But this is not all that there is, right? This is very limiting. So when we think of one-dimensional space, one dimension is, in this model, the highest dimension. It includes all of the probability of all 11 dimensions of space-time. There are 11 dimensions. The way that I visualize it, kind of stole that from, theoretical physics, string theory, stuff like that. I know there are a lot of different views on that, but I like the number 11. Doesn't mean that there necessarily are, but I can conceptualize it to 11 dimensions. So when we're looking at the first dimension being the highest probability of, not the highest probability, but the highest dimension in that it contains all probability for all of space, right? It doesn't matter, it's a point in space, but it contains the equal probability for every point in space that will ever exist in any dimension of space. So it's really the most important dimension. But in one-dimensional space, you can only be in one place, right? You can only be in one point until you add a second dimension. And when you add a second dimension, now you have the ability to color in space, right? I can color. I can walk through walls. There are no walls in 2-dimensional space. I can, make an X on a piece of paper, for instance. So there is no obstruction. The second dimension isn't really adding space, because the probability of all space exists in the first dimension. But what it is adding is the ability to move through space uninhibited And it does remove the obstruction or the confinement of only being able to collapse to one probability in space, right? When you have a 2D space, now I can connect a line, right? Now, like I said, I can draw an X, I can draw all kinds of shapes, and I can fold the paper when I get into 3D, right? And that's where, when we're looking at 3D, we're going back to the difference between 1 dimension and 2 dimensions. 2 dimensions isn't really adding space, but it's adding functionality to the space that already exists, right? So now I can move along a plane in any direction, any way, any plane, any 2-dimensional plane, and I'm going to be able to do all of the things that 2-dimensional space allows me to do. Now, as a 2-dimensional being in 2-dimensional space, I could never fold the paper, right? It's not until I get to 3D, which is adding space, right? I didn't add any space in 2D because 2D is a lower dimension, right? I already had the probability of space, but in 3D, I'm adding a layer of space, of actual space, and with that comes obstruction. With that comes a wall. With that comes a barrier, that's going to prevent me. I can't color in 3D space, right? It's not until, and when we're talking about dimensions, by the way, we're talking about spatial dimensions. We're not talking about time being a part of space. It is, but you unlock more capabilities of time as you move up in the dimensions. So when we're talking about 3D space, we are adding space and we're adding obstruction. But by adding the obstruction, I'm giving myself the ability to fold space, right? I'm giving myself the ability to fold the piece of paper any way that I see fit, connecting any 2 points that I want in space, allowing them to become the same point. So what would happen when I add a 4th dimension? Well, a 4th dimension would give me the ability to walk through walls. The ground wouldn't exist unless I wanted it to, right? Because when I access the 4th dimension is connected to the 2nd dimension, so I can operate in both capacities, right? I can choose to stand on the ground theoretically, or I can choose to inhabit a space inside of the ground, or a space inside of any object. There is no obstruction in 4 dimensions, right? I can move right through it. And it also is a lower dimension. So all of these lower dimensions are connected together and giving me the ability to do what we need to do to stitch the map together. And that's what we're doing. We're using science. We're using theoretical physics and the concepts that go along with the scientific establishment and saying, okay, how would this actually work on a flat Earth if we include the modern understanding of quantum mechanics? And I love quantum mechanics. I'm not really a big fan of astrophysics, but I do like quantum mechanics. I find quantum mechanics, quantum physics very interesting, much more interesting to me and much more fulfilling to me than astrophysics would be. Because astrophysics, you're seeing the end result, right? You're not seeing the process. You're not seeing what's actually going on under the surface. You're just looking at something and you're saying, oh, that's this. Right? I think it's a lot deeper than that. So when we add a 5th dimension, we're adding space, but we're also adding obstruction. And just like the difference between going from 2D to 3D, when I go from 4D to 5D, I'm gaining the same capabilities of my power over space, right? So going from 3 dimensions to 1 dimension, or from 1 dimension to 3 dimensions, 3 dimensions is giving me the ability to fold a piece of paper in half, right? So why wouldn't 5 dimensions give me the ability to fold 3D space in half and connect this side of the Earth with this side of the Earth inside of a construct that is a very limited, structure compared to what exists beyond it? Okay, and that's what, when we're looking at the map, when we're looking at the structure, when we're thinking about all these things, it's not just cut and dry, oh, God created the flat Earth and it's a real small cosmos. No, the cosmos is vast. There is a bottomless chasm underneath the Earth. Okay, so these stars, these angels, these angelic hosts, the ones in the circumpolar rotations, they're in the judgment, right? For 10,000 God years, not 10,000 human years, 10,000 God years. So I don't know how long God years are, but I'm assuming that they're really, really long compared to human years. But that's all we know about it. You know, they're in a cycle for 10,000 years, God years. And that makes really a lot of sense when you're, you know, as above, so below. You look at the ancient philosophies surrounding the earth and the nature of the cosmos that we live in. You have infinite planes of existence that are basically stacked. It's like God hovering over the face of the water, the infinite level of water, bringing forth the earth, forming the reset line in the water. Where the earth, where's the edge? Well, there is no edge. The earth goes on forever and ever in every direction, resetting on itself. Because we can only inhabit three-dimensional reality. As a three-dimensional being, we can't inhabit 6 dimensions, right? That's why the sun can be right over here around the edge of the disk of the earth, and we would never see the sun in the sky. The only way we're able to see the sun is we see the sun displayed in the heavens above us, right? It's like a reflection. It is, and what it is if we look at the way that this would work, I have the earth here and I have a sphere here. This is what most people imagine the earth being, is a ball. But the ball is actually not the earth. The ball is what houses the earth. Right? And if I can get this to actually pull out, I don't know what's going on with it, why it's not letting me click on it. But basically, the earth fits inside of a sphere. And the edge of the sphere is the edge of the earth. And then you have the 4 corners, you know, where there are angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth. Okay, so the 4 corners surround that sphere. We can't access the corners, right? Because they're beyond our 3-dimensional space. Our 3-dimensional space is the circle. Okay, we can't go beyond the circle. So when I am traveling this way, if I hit the edge of the sphere, I'm going to reset on the other side. The sphere encompasses our existence. Now, here's the trippy thing about the sphere. If I take off in a direction, in a trajectory this way, and what it would be more like this. It would be more like a transfer orbit. Look at where I'm going to reset. I'm going to reset down here, right? But when I reset down here, because the cosmos itself is contained inside of 6 dimensions, you can, in this model, theoretically, put the cosmos as big as it is below the earth. And it's going to shine through the earth, and we're going to see it from the other side because we're looking through the reset line. It's seamless all the way around, right? If the sun is setting in the west, I'm seeing it rise in the east, or vice versa, right? If it's setting over here, I'm seeing it rise over here at the same time because it's a seamless reset. I can see through it. You know, when I'm looking this way, I can see through to the sky this way. So when I'm looking this way, I can see through to the cosmos this way. But it works like a mirror because space is bent on itself. And it depends on where you're standing on the earth. Look at the shape of the sphere, right? Like a mirror. What kind of a mirror would it be? God didn't tell us that. He didn't share that with us so that we would think that the sky is a big parabolic mirror. But the reason he shared it with us is because if you use a parabolic mirror, you can replicate the sky. You can replicate exactly what we see. So if you think about it in the terms of the physical reality of physics, you know, of astrophysics, I use a mirror to demonstrate it. And I'm not going to do that in this video. I'm going to be remaking my mirror video and publishing it at least in 1080p in high quality, because the other one I published was 720p and the original recording was in 4K. So you can't really see how detailed those stars, the pile of salt on each side really is. But it was a proof of concept video saying, look, we can make both circumpolar motions visible on each side of the earth and even replicate the hour because of what a parabolic mirror does. Right? So the parabolic mirror is proof of concept. But when we're looking at the model, it says it's like a mirror. right? It doesn't mean it is a mirror. And, people make fun of this, and it's the same people who will believe in the Dyson sphere. That you believe that a Dyson sphere is something that could happen with nanotechnology, but you make fun of my gigantic parabolic mirror in the sky, which wouldn't be nearly as big as a Dyson sphere would be. A Dyson sphere would be really something, in my mind, even with nanotechnology, that's just beyond impossible, but it's theoretical. And it's things that people have come up with, like, yeah, maybe in the future. Well, maybe in the future, nanotechnology built a big mirror in the sky, right? I mean, it's the same concept. You can't say that that's impossible. And especially when you make it see-through and penetrable, right? I don't believe the barrier is a solid barrier. I believe you can see through it. I believe you can fly through it. If I fly through it like the ISS, if I'm going straight across the Earth, I'm going to reset and I'm going to drift because of the Coriolis effect. The Coriolis effect is not taking place on Earth. The Coriolis effect is taking place in the heavens. And it's actually what's taking place down here in the cosmos, because all of those stars that we see in those bottomless chasms on each side, there are two of them, with the ecliptic running around the outside. So if you look at the model, the ecliptic and the sun and the moon are basically at the same level as the Earth, but they're rotating around the outside of the Earth. And then below that, you have the two circumpolar motions, which are down in the bottomless pit of the Earth. So the leaders of the stars, Uriel, all of the holy angels that are flying along the ecliptic, the things you see in the sky, Venus, Jupiter, those things are not in the bottomless pit. What does appear to be in the bottomless pit are the stars that are circumpolar. Polaris would be in the bottomless pit, the light at the bottom of the bottomless pit. Any of the other stars would also be, that are in either circumpolar rotation, north or south, are the angelic hosts that are also in the bottomless pit. And that's where you have to change your mentality too when you're thinking about these things. When you change the model, you're changing the concept of everything. You're changing what these things are. The stars are no longer other suns, right? They are angelic hosts. Because if the Bible is true, and this is right, where the angelic hosts are what we see in the sky, then they are angels, right? If this model is true, then we're definitely looking at angels. We're not looking at stars. And they all have their own frequency. They all have their own pattern. I recommend that if you have not, ever played with a P1000 camera, it's the cheapest way to get into astrophotography. But what's really cool about it is you can just point and zoom in on distant objects like stars. And you'll notice that every star has a different frequency. It's got a different color pattern. And people say, well, that proves, infraspectrometer proves that that star is made of blah, blah, blah. But what we're seeing is lights and colors and frequency in the sky. Let's be real about it and move beyond the NASA trickery. But again, so the Earth is housed inside of 3 dimensions, but the 3 dimensions are contained in a 6-dimensional lattice. The reason why we have to have 6 dimensions is because the stars must have the ability to shine through the obstruction so that they can shine through the Earth. The 4th dimension is giving them the ability to shine through the Earth, but when I add a 5th dimension, I'm adding more obstruction because I'm adding more space, which means that I need to remove the obstruction in the 5th dimension. And basically, so with 5 dimensions, I would be able to travel anywhere in space instantly. Not anywhere in time, okay? Not anywhere in space-time, but anywhere in space. Now, when I get to the 7th dimension, then I'm adding another layer to it where I can move in time. Now, the question that I have is, am I only able to move forward in time, or would I be able to move forward and backwards in time? I'm not sure that the past can be accessed that way. I don't know. You can think about it in different ways. But what we do know is theoretically, up until you get to beyond the 4th dimension, there's theoretical math that goes along with the fourth dimension, with what a fourth dimension would look like, with the capabilities that you would have in four dimensions. And it's just like the cosmos being able to be as vast as it is. I mean, think about the size of the sphere, right? So if you're in the ISS traveling above the Earth, you're going to hit the side, you're going to reset. If you're on the Earth traveling in a ship, you're going to hit the side, you're going to reset, right? But if we think about as a matter of fact, I lost my train of thought. I'm going to backtrack real quick. All right, so I remembered what I was saying. So if you're in the ISS, you're going to reset at the edge. So how wide is the sphere? And it would be the width of the circumference of the Earth. Because if Earth is not a ball itself, and the sphere that you're seeing is the sphere of the sky above you, which is actually a hemisphere with two sides, which is mistaken for a sphere, you're going to be able to, or your diameter, that's where we're going with it. Come on, Chris. Your diameter of this is going to be about 24,000 miles, right? So the diameter at the widest point of the sphere in all directions is going to be 24,000 miles. But the entire cosmos can fit, and I'm talking about light years of cosmos, can fit into the bottom half of this ball, into the bottom half of the sphere. That is where the bottomless pit is. And the way we're able to do that is because we have 3 dimensions that are tied up in 6 dimensions. So when I infiltrate, or when I tie the 6th dimension into 3-dimensional space by allowing a view of the cosmos into the sky, what's happening is that the lower dimensions that are all connected together are giving me access to that entire path. You see what I'm saying? I mean, if it doesn't make sense, we're going to go into it a little bit deeper, a lot deeper actually, you know, as far as how this stitch together actually works, because it's really fascinating to think about it from a 6-dimensional lattice perspective. So if you look at particles inside of a cloud chamber, you see them doing all sorts of weird patterns and accelerating at different rates and doing different things. And just imagine that each particle has its own place up here in the sphere. Imagine the inside of a sphere, right? So imagine all of the points, all of the possible points in space that exist inside of a sphere, and then imagine the particles that are traveling inside of this lattice that they're resetting based on a frequency, right? So you have a frequency pattern that for each one of these individual particles that's coming in every direction, right? So the atoms are contained within the lattice, but then you have the particles, which are the code of the atom, right? So that's what codes it. You have the electrons, you have all of these subatomic particles. That's what's writing, right? What we see. And what we see works a lot more like a render than it does an actual reality when I'm looking at it, when I'm thinking about it. And, you know, these things are all theoretical, like I said, but what's fascinating to me, guys, is that when you put the model of the Bible together and you say, okay, how would I triangulate a flat earth map? Well, it's a one-sided earth with an angel that makes a reset line, right? Something beyond the physics of what we understand. Remember, the creator has to be beyond matter, time, energy, and space. So the creator's beyond everything that we are or everything that we understand if the creator exists as we understand the creator, right? Now, if we understand the creator as, you know, a UFO came down and put man on the earth, you have the same God dilemma, like who created the UFO? Like who created the UFO that created the UFO that created the UFO? And you only have like 15 billion years to work with in the cosmological model of the Big Bang. So it becomes really stupid and complicated. I mean, again, what's the simplest proposition? Well, the simplest proposition is that 3D space is just a very small part of the total structure of reality. And that's what we see. When we look up at the cosmos, we see that a lot of matter, there's a lot of structure that appears to be missing, right? Well, maybe there's a lot more structure that's missing than what appears to be missing. And that's what I'm proposing is that, look, this is a very small, this is rendered like a video game. This is rendered based on scale, right? If you're standing in front of a 10-foot tall tree, you have to look up at the top of the tree if you're 2 foot away. But if I move 20 feet down the road from that 10-foot tall tree, it's half the size. And then I move 40 feet away, it's about eye level, right? I'm looking at a 10-foot tall tree from 40 feet away. I might be gazing up a little bit, but when I go back to 80 feet, I'm definitely looking eye level. And when I go to 160 feet, I'm looking down at that tree, right? It's 10 feet tall. And from 160 feet, I am changing my complete perspective of the tree, meaning light is not propagating in straight lines to my eyes, right? If I was looking down at the tree standing directly in front of it, I would only see the bottom part of the trunk. I would only see the bottom third of the tree if it's 10 foot tall, maybe the bottom half, right? If I'm looking down at it. So peripherally, I might be able to see the bottom half of the tree. But if I'm moving 160 feet away from the tree and light is propagating straight towards my eyes, then I should always be looking at the bottom of the tree from that angle. But in our reality, because we don't have 6-dimensional space, we could not perceive that. Right? It would be like scribbling on a piece of paper. You would not be able to even reconcile it. So yeah, when you weigh it on probability and when you really start to think about these things, the biblical model makes a lot more sense than the heliocentric model, because it includes being created from that which is unseen, right? That's the thing about the Bible is people say the Bible is not a science book, but the Bible told you thousands of years ago, before the telescope, that the stars of the heavens were as innumerable as the sands of the sea, right? So thousands of years before we had telescopes to verify that, the Bible knew that. The ancient man didn't know that you can only see 5,000 stars on the entire surface of Earth. You know, so if ancient man didn't know that, but the Bible was saying that, the other half of that equation, which goes along with the sand and the stars, is that from a quantum mechanics standpoint or a quantum physics standpoint, everything that is seen, that is tangible, is made from that which is unseen. So again, the Bible's telling you, hey, all of these tangible things are made from something that's much, much smaller. So it is a science book in that it was talking about these things thousands of years before we ever conceptualized them. And when you put them together and you take them literally, right? Like in Enoch, where he says the sun is rising and setting through these portals, and that there are 12 windows in each portal. So you have exactly 72 positions of the sun and moon here and there, both there and here. And you have this perfect model that, just reveals itself when you say, wait a minute, it's kind of crazy when I look at it in terms of the heliocentric model. But when I think about it in terms of how things actually might work, it actually makes a lot of sense. But you have to go out of the heliocentric model mindset. This is a ball, right? This works like a ball. And if it's convex, which I believe it is, convex a little bit, then it would be imperceivable, right? There's no difference. I mean, if you're flying a spacecraft over the ball and you're thinking it's a ball and it's got a little bit of convexity, you can see the edge of that circle, right? Which you would see, everything would be compressed together on the horizon, less and less so as you gained altitude, but you're at however many miles, I mean, you're seeing to the edge. So it doesn't really matter how compressed it is, you're seeing around that horizon, right? You're seeing around that, you're seeing the actual circle of the earth, if that is what it is. So anyway, man, I'm gonna stop for now with this. Hopefully, those of you who've been thinking about this can kind of start to conceptualize it, because we're going to, like I said, be going into it. I'm going to be making more videos in the coming weeks and days. I'm planning on making a lot more, God willing. But I get so sidetracked in my thought process. I need to plan out better what I want to say, because I have so much to say about each of these individual things. But yes, it does work. It triangulates perfectly. The circle is as big as you need it to be, right? The water is the size that it is. So it doesn't matter what direction that I travel. All of the great circle routes work. You know, that's what people say. Well, you can't do it without great circle routes, or you blah, blah, blah. Well, great circle routes work on this map. And it's because of the way that everything is triangulated in the center, right? We've gotten caught up with this concept of having to have a wall that encompasses the water, but if the water encompasses itself, you don't really need a wall, right? Something's up with Antarctica. I'm not saying there's not some weird crap going on in Antarctica. There clearly is. But this would allow for a 24-hour sun in Antarctica. The mirror actually does this. So the sun travels in a figure 8 pattern throughout the year. You can see the tropics where the path of the sun would be. It's going to rise in the east and it's going to set in the west. It would rise to the southeast of New Zealand. It would set to the southwest of New Zealand on summer solstice in the southern hemisphere. You would have the circular path of the sun over the Arctic during the northern hemisphere. So everything works exactly the way that it's described to work. Now, whether it actually works that way or not, there are a lot of people who say, well, the 24-hour sun in Antarctica doesn't happen. Maybe it doesn't. I haven't seen a lot of really compelling evidence for it. But I'm assuming that it does. I'm assuming that that part of it is true. I'm assuming that we can go up in orbit. I don't think there's anybody aboard the ISS because there's not really a lot you can do up there. Maybe there is, but I've seen a lot of trickery, right? A lot of fakery with ISS, but we're just going to assume that ISS is possible. That, obviously I can go outside and look at it, right? Something's there. Whether it's a sodium laser in the sky or a balloon or whatever you want to say it is, who knows? Something is above us though, so we're going to say, okay, the ISS. Well, how does ISS work? Well, it orbits in one side and out the other and back around to the other side because of the Coriolis. And the drift, that it's experiencing is based on the motion of the heavens that are actually taking place in the cosmos once a day below the Earth. So imagine that the cosmos is as big as it is. You have these two circular pits in the bottomless pit that are spinning with stars 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but they're doing a full rotation, right? So if it's as big as it is, that means all those stars and all those galaxies, quote unquote, that we see are moving at many, many times the speed of light, if it is as big as it is. And it can be. That's the thing. If the sky becomes a reflection, things can be very, very, very far away. And because of the reflection is what's causing what you see in the sky based on where you're standing, the distance doesn't really matter, right? I mean, they could be further away. The sun might be way further away than 93 million miles. It may be way bigger, right? We don't know. We're seeing the light of the sun on the earth exactly the way we're supposed to, because that's the way that God made it. We're living in a creation. Think about the video games that we can make. Look at this. This would work very much like a render, very much like a video game. And it seems to me that based on probability, there is a lot missing from our existence. We are very limited. I feel very limited in this body. I feel like there's so much more to the total existence than what we're experiencing. And plugging into a computer isn't going to take you to that next level, right? I'm talking about something ethereal, something that's beyond the tangible, hardcore wire numbers, logic BS of this existence. I mean, there's more layers. There are a lot more layers. And that's what's exciting about it too. When you start to really think about it, I mean, you could be literally playing yourself in some kind of a game. There's so many different possibilities, but I do believe that the Word of God is what brought forth all of this into existence. Think about that. The Word of God. And everything that we see was brought forth by the Word of God. And I'm not talking about an AI program. Again, I'm talking about something beyond matter, time, energy, and space. If anything, you and I are the AI program, right? So that's it for today. I've gone on talking for 35 minutes, but I have a lot to say about this. I'm going to say a lot more, so I'll see you guys in the next video. If you have any questions, please comment.